Welcome new and old friends. My name is 242, and today 42 decide we should do one sci-fi story. She even borrowed some other narrators to help bring it to life. So, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. My big toe hasn't stopped swelling since I kicked that headstone on a dare. I peel the rotting, blackened nail away, expecting to see a new nail growing underneath, but instead, I see another toe. Leviathan by Sean E. Britten. Main narrated by 242. Special guests, September Dragon Audio, PA Nightmares, Silver Underworld, As the Raven Dreams, and Willow the Schizo.
Mysterious object is 6,000 clicks out and closing.
If long-range scanners haven't picked this one up, it could have passed right through our solar system without us ever knowing.
We don't know if it's anything yet. It could just be a rogue comet, an asteroid.
Chemical analysis picked up organic compounds.
We'll know more soon.
Whatever it is, the trajectory shows it came from deep, deep space. Nothing out there for millions of light years. It could have been floating out there longer than human beings have existed, longer than Earth has existed. Star floated at the front of the Situation Room, chewing her lower lip. Their ship, Melvin 1, had been mapping and taking samples in the Kuiper Belt with the aim towards future mining, when they had been redirected to intercept this mysterious object. Star didn't look excited to be in command for this potentially historic moment. She looked nervous as hell. Feldman and Gideon drifted around the outskirts of the room with the rest of the crew, chatting excitedly and grabbing for handhelds so they don't float into one another in the zero gravity. Hologram and screen readouts at the head of the room gave updates on the progress and showed perceived images of the object itself. Around 2.2 kilometers in length, their target was roughly oblong in shape. Frozen, it reflected light like comet, but something other than dirt and rock lay beneath the surface. If the organic readings were correct, then this could be humanity's first proof of alien life. Real alien life. Larger than bacteria. Much, much larger. Once we arrive, we'll be taking much more detailed scans and measurements. If possible, a team will be going down to the object itself to take samples. Star continued. Same as any other asteroid. We need absolute professionalism on this job. Then we'll be awaiting further company orders. As they approached the object and matched the trajectory, the crew crowded the observation deck. A dozen of them jostled elbow to elbow in defiance of the company regulations. Even Star, usually as by the books as they came, wasn't going to deny anyone this monumental opportunity. Across the outside of the window, itself several inches of glass steel, an armored curtain protected the interior from solar radiation and micrometeoroids. They maneuvered into position and the shield peeled back. Feldman and Gideon bobbed next to one another.
Mother of God,
Gideon murmured. Religious awe seemed like an appropriate reaction. An astonished hush settled over the deck. Beyond the mysterious object was nothing, was a distant star field, nothing to give it scale. Feldman struggled to make sense of the size of the object, disoriented. If they hadn't been floating in zero-G, he would have had to sit down. What they were looking at was clearly a life form, or the corpse of one, but over 2 kilometers in length. Its basic body type was fish-like, or like a squid, with a cylindrical body and tentacles on the end, but with a number of other appendages as well. The cluster of tentacles to the trail end of the creature made up only about a third of its total length, frozen in a series of coils and snares. A series of other appendages, flippers, and crab-like legs appeared to be tucked against what Feldman thought as the alien's underbelly. Its flesh was reddish-brown beneath the coat of ice, and they could see the scales and ripples and all the imperfections of the once living thing. Some other bits of matter, they almost looked like vegetable growth, were stuck in that ice. A haze of ice crystals and other chunks of darker matter traveled in a cloud surrounding the dead creature during its journey through space.
Look at that eye.
Feldman said.
Look at that mouth. Those teeth.
Gideon said. At the other end of the creature's body, from the mass of tentacles, was obviously a head. Feldman immediately felt drawn to the staring eye. There was only one eye on the side facing them. Feldman was astonished how, not human, but how Earth-like it looked. Like a normal Earth-based fish eye. Bright gold and was perfectly round, black pupil. But if Feldman had the scale right, said eye was as wide as a city block. Somewhere in the region of 25 to 300 meters across. Just below it was a canyon of a mouth, revealing teeth that must have been at least 10 stories long.
This is incredible!
One of the other crew said.
Impossible.
It's real. It's really, really real. This is the first proof of actual alien life.
We don't know that yet, Star said.
Come on now, Commander. That is an alien. An actual living creature. Or it was.
We'll need to take samples, Star said.
Are those some kind of wounds in its side?
Feldman said, pointing. The creature and the ice surrounding it were pitted by dozens of craters, big and small. No doubt souvenirs of collisions with other random bodies during the unimaginable long journey through space. Roughly around the middle of the creature's body were 4 roughly square holes, arranged diagonally in a strangely even row. They appeared to be under the ice, as if they'd been afflicted on the beast before it was frozen. Maybe when it was still alive.
They could be some kind of missile strikes or harpoon marks.
One of the science techs, Simpson, said.
Although, they're curiously straight.
What could do that to that?
Once the crew were over their initial awe, they got to work according to the orders they were given. Melville 1 observed the creature from all angles, laser mapping every inch of its gargantuan surface. Sonics probed beneath the ice and deep as they could into the creature's flesh. Chemical analysis was made remotely and samples taken from the clouds surrounding it. The company needs you to go down to the surface to collect samples, Star said.
Really?
Feldman felt a mix of exhilaration and terror.
What if it isn't really dead? What if it's sleeping in hibernation this whole time, and we wake it up?
Gideon asked. Our dating methods put the object something like 4 billion years ago, Star said. It's shown no reaction to our presence, and our scans have shown no signs of life.
No sign of life as we know.
Gideon said.
But maybe these things live in space. Maybe this is how they survive, by going into some kind of death-like state, until they come across something to eat, and then they wake up.
If you're refusing to follow orders, that's fine. I can find somebody else who will do it. I was giving you first crack because you're our primary spacewalking team.
Oh, no way.
Gideon shook his head vehemently.
I wouldn't miss this for a year's pay.
Spacesuits had come a long way from the early days of space travel. Feldman and Gideon clipped into theirs easily while in the launch bay. The baggy legs and sleeves around their limbs and the loose folds around their torsos sealed themselves tightly. Both fit helmets over their heads and attached them to their collars. As was regulation, though, Feldman and Gideon double and triple checked all one another's seals and joints. They clipped jetpacks over their shoulders. "If you're ready, we'll open the hatch." Star's voice came clear through their helmet comms.
Ready to go, Miva?
Feldman said. "Hatch opening in 3, 2, 1. The launch bay's hatch yawned open to the void. Several kilometers off the side of the Melville drifted the enormous creature. The frozen alien was actually traveling at an extraordinary speed through the great nothingness. But given that the Melville 1 was matching its speed and trajectory, and given the lack of surrounding to give it context, it almost appeared to be standing still. Feldman and Gideon detached from the Melville and used their jetpacks to guide them across the gap. Foaming trails of white propellant dissipated behind them. Between the two of them, they carried a sled loaded with equipment they would need for their mission. Apart from the Melville and the creature and its surrounding cloud, all around them was unimaginable nothing. A nothing the human mind could not contain. Even after dozens of spacewalks, Feldman had to concentrate on the task at hand to avoid being overwhelmed by it. But then, the task at hand was itself overwhelming. As they got closer, the creature loomed and loomed. Again, too big for the mind to contain. Not as a once-living thing. With nothing between them, it was astonishing. If it had been alive, moving, Feldman was sure his mind could not have handled it. He could only take in piece by piece as it was. The frozen tentacles, the appendages, the rippling of flesh and scales the size of buildings, that tremendous eye. They were less than ants against it as they closed in. "Report in, away team," Star said.
Away team, everything in the green out here, Miaville?
Feldman said.
This is a historic moment. You think about what you're going to say?
Gideon said over the comms.
What? What am I gonna say?
Feldman said.
It's like the first man on the moon. The first man to set foot on proof of alien life form.
Why me? Why have I got to say it?
You're the ranking officer.
They negotiated their way through the creature's surrounding ice cloud, avoiding any large chunks of ice and other matter. Tiny ice crystals clung to their suits. They couldn't feel them, of course. Outside the suit was the absolute zero of the void. The suit was a shield and heated. The surface of the creature rushed towards them. They used propellant to slow their approach. Feldman felt his boot hit the surface with a noiseless crunch, his knees accepting the landing. Behind him, Gideon slowed to a landing as well.
There are certain occasions,
Feldman said,
when a man takes this whole universe for a vast practical joke, the wit of which he only dimly discerns, and he more than suspects the joke is at nobody's expense but his own.
Pat's rule.
Gideon said.
What was yours?
It's from Moby Dick.
Feldman said, and when he sensed Gideon's cluelessness, he jerked his helmet back to their ship.
The Miaville? It seems appropriate. I'm pretty sure I botched it, though.
The ice covering the creature formed a relatively thin skin only a few meters thick, while the creature technically had its own gravity, like any mass in space. It wasn't enough to be noticeable by Feldman or Gideon. Their boots clung to ice instead as they set up to take a sample. The equipment on their sled looked similar to equipment used to take ice core samples on Earth. A towing cylinder attached to a large tripod, wrenches, and a boxy motor, which they all quickly and easily assembled. In the vacuum of space, Feldman of course couldn't hear the drill as it did its work, but he placed his gloved hand on the cylinder, he could feel the vibration. The drill sank easily through the ice coating. As it met the creature's flesh, it bit into it. Feldman and Gideon waited with a nervous anticipation. In spite of the assurances and Feldman's own conviction that the space beast was long dead, if anything was going to happen then, he felt strongly it would happen now. The creature's vast flesh, rippling reddish-brown scales spreading all around them like an island in space. The drill would be less than a pinprick, less than a mosquito bite, but both of them still held their breath. Nothing happened. The fantastic corpse remained as unresponsive as ever. Eventually, the equipment returned with a cylinder of tightly compacted and ancient flesh, frozen solid eons ago. Feldman handled it for a moment with the appropriate reverence, then loaded it onto the sled. Orders were to take the samples for several regions if possible. Collecting the equipment, they set off across the creature. Unwieldy as the equipment looked, it was easy to move in zero gravity, and Feldman and Gideon had done the same routine many times under more difficult circumstances. Their boots gripped the ice with each step.
Advancing toward the head, Mevo.
They took 2 more samples, each time without incident. The creature's antediluvian flesh was extremely tense and frozen to rock, but their drill was equipped with both lasers and diamond teeth. They continued until they could see the creature's blunt nose, its monstrous mouth with teeth like skyscrapers, up ahead against the backdrop of space. Looking down, Feldman realized that he and Gibson were trekking across the creature's massive eye. Gold with a pupil like a bottomless pit, staring eternally through the ice. Feldman had settled into the job like it was a normal task, but almost became overcome with an emotion he couldn't name. A mixture of terror and awe. Not terror of some physical threat, but an almost religious terror, like being in the presence of God and realizing just how tiny and unworthy one single human being was. He'd earlier remembered a video he had seen once of a diver coming across a whale in one of those Earth's oceans before they went extinct. The enormous mouth suddenly rushing out of the Stygian depth as if to consume the diver, looking big enough to consume the whole world. The diver minuscule in comparison. Said whale would have been 1,000th the size of this creature they stood on. It would have gotten lost in the yawning black of the creature's pupil. Feldman couldn't help but think what he would do if the eye, staring up through the ice field, was to suddenly blink. And whatever he told himself, the answer was probably that he would go insane. Feldman, are you alright? We're getting an increased reading from your suit, heart rate and respiration. Star's voice came through Feldman's comm.
Yeah. Yes. Alright, thank you, Mevo.
Feldman felt very aware that every word he said might be recorded for historical purposes.
Just struck again, for a moment, by the immensity of it all.
Braver now, Feldman and Gideon set the core sampler over the creature's enormous eye. They drilled down into the golden iris. If anything was likely to get a reaction, it would have been that. But, of course, nothing happened, and the jelly of the tremendous eye was frozen, just as solid as the rest of the creature's flesh. Feldman and Gideon retrieved their samples and then disassembled the equipment, packing it back onto the sled. Firing streams of propellant, the two astronauts left the surface of the frozen creature and returned to the Melvin 1. Feldman and Gideon met with Star and the head science tech Simpson in the Situation Room. A glowing hologram of the space creature evolved around the central console. Everything was captured in perfect detail. The long oval of a body, tangle of limbs, and its staring eye. Even the sparkling cloud of ice and debris that hung around it. Star had to deliver a report back to the company heads. Feldman and Gideon didn't need to be there for Simpson's update, but Star figured they had earned it. "What have we got?" Star said.
The samples confirm that the object is organic, carbon-based, like you or I, or any life from Earth, but there are chemical structures like we've never seen. Of course, it's alien.
Simpson said.
Besides the samples from the animal itself, we've studied the bits of darker matter floating around the creature. They appear to be vegetable in structure.
What do we know about the creature?
You've got to remember, my expertise is in chemistry and geology, not xenobiology. People are going to study this thing for years, decades.
Yeah, this is just gotta go in the initial report, Doc. You're not being graded.
Well, based on the scans, we have no reason to believe this creature naturally evolved to live in space. It appears to be some kind of aquatic creature, launched into space somehow. The limbs and body are designed for moving through water. There's nothing that suggests adaptation for space travel.
Any theories as to how it ended up floating in the dead of space then?
Based on our analysis of the samples, its flesh was exposed to some kind of high heat that basically cooked its entire structure, sometime before it was frozen solid. Maybe some kind of explosion or contact with an atmosphere.
What about those holes in its side?
Feldman pointed at the hologram.
4 deep, squarish holes arranged in almost a perfect row. Any idea what could have caused that?
Simpson shrugged.
We've analyzed them. There's no blast scorching and no signs of cauterization. That would suggest missiles or lasers. Maybe wherever the animal comes from, they're hunted by some kind of giant harpoons.
What could that do?
I have no idea. Wherever this thing comes from, it could be just as big and threatening to any intelligent race there as it is to us. They just developed the weapons necessary to deal with them.
What are you gonna do now?
Gibson asked. Orders are to attach ourselves to it and move the object ourselves. We'll establish it in orbit around the Earth where more scientists can study it, Star said.
We'll be studying it for decades trying to figure out its mysteries.
Simpson said.
It's solved at least one great mystery, though. We are not alone in the universe.
But how? If it's from a planet like ours, or whatever, how do you get into deep space in the first place?
Feldman said.
How did it find its way to us?
That mystery, we may never know.
4 billion years earlier. Another spacecraft, shaped like a box saucer, spun slowly through the endless void. A long-range research vessel, home to 4 Zabraxian scientists and their family. While in some ways the ship would be a perfect match for human expectations of what an alien spacecraft should look like, it was built to a scale almost inconceivable to human imagination. Astronomically more colossal than anything human hands could or would ever create.
So they never believes.
A Zabraxian child sat at the table in a craft's residential wing, with a fork wrapped in the finger tentacles of a primary manipulator. They poked lifelessly at the food left on their plate.
I don't want any more.
The child whined.
Just 2 more bites.
The child's primary parent said. Stabbing the last of the salvin on his plate with his fork and the 4 prongs, the Zabraxian child steered it around the plate. The fish-like creature, with its tangle of tentacles, golden eye, and pin-like teeth, would be less than a mouthful for the child. It picked up flecks of the leftover vegetables strewn out on the plate. Several of the Zabraxian parents' eye slats swirled towards the child. Its primary and secondary manipulators remained occupied at the sink with their duties.
Don't play with it. Just leave it with it. I don't want it. I'm full. Then that way you know what deserve it. Give me some full. Just finish your vegetables and give it to mom.
Half a dozen nostrils flared and the Zabraxi child finished the last of its vegetables. Their parents took the plate and the utensils and turned back to the sink. They noticed a single remaining salgov on the plate, 4 tiny holes stabbed across its midsection, but ignored it. Pick your battles. Instead, the Zabraxian parent fed it into the garbage disposal, washed it down with the scraps of vegetable matter. The spacecraft's disposal system filtered the water from the solid waste. The water siphoned away from the recycling. Solid biological waste was ejected into space. As the craft traveled to the void, a tiny hatch opened in its side. The waste from the child's dinner fired into space, freezing instantly, a coat of ice forming over its surface, its tentacles and appendages solidifying into twisted patterns. Already forgotten, the frozen creature began its journey into the emptiness of deep, deep space. Please help. I knew that I shouldn't have shot the golden deer, but its fur looked so warm and I was starving. Now my new coat won't come off, and it hurts so much each time my body changes. And with that, we're near the end of this video. First, I would like to thank Sean E. Britten for letting me read his story. He also has something at the end here I'd like to read for you. I really enjoyed this story, although I worry the ending might make it seem more like the setup for a punchline that's not really what I intended. I like stories with this kind of mystery, full of ultimately unanswerable questions either for the reader or for the characters. It wouldn't surprise me if our first undeniable proof of alien life didn't come to us in a similar way. Not as an invading force or a benevolent meeting of the minds, but as a slightly frustrating, intriguing, fascinating mystery that only serves as a tiny piece of a much larger puzzle. I personally found the ending humorous, but not because I thought it was a punchline, but because for the aliens, it was so mundane. But for us, it was so monumental. And truth be told, a lot of the monumental things we have found in our own history has been like that. So I could see this being true. I'm very happy that the writer gave us some insight on how he felt and thought about the story. I would like to thank those who helped me bring these stories together. September Dragon Audio, PA Nightmares, As the Raven Dreams, Willow the Schizo, and Silver Underworld. Please make sure you go to the description box down below to check out all these narrators. But before you do that, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. If you'd like to help out in any way, please just share this YouTube channel / podcast with anyone you think who might enjoy it. You'd be surprised how much that helps. If you would like to help in other ways, I have a Patreon, merch, and PayPal. But first, let's get you that Sunday word so you can write me a comment down below with it. On screen right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is everyone who wrote me something last week using the word correction. Thanks, both of you. You guys are awesome. Now, this Sunday's word is tolerant, which means showing a willingness to allow the existence of opinions or behaviors that one does not necessarily agree with, or with plants or machines, able to endure specific conditions or treatments. So, if you're on YouTube, write me a sentence down below using this word and you'll be in that pretty picture next week. If you're on the podcast, you can go to my Twitter or my Instagram, adding me, and write me a sentence using this word, and you'll be in the same pretty picture next week. But as always, thank you for watching and listening. It really means the world to me. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.